Hi, in today's second episode of 100 Best PC RPGs of 1990s, we'll get to talk about spots 80 to 61. And I have to tell you that they're much better than the bottom 20 was. So, not to waste any more of your time, let's jump right in. Realms of Arkania Blade of Destiny is the first entry in the often overlooked now cult classic series of RPGs based on German pen and paper system Das Schwarze Auge, which roughly translates to either the dark eye or the blood sausage. You pick the one you feel fits best. Interestingly enough, unlike in most other RPGs of the 90s, characters in Blade of Destiny not only have positive traits but also negative ones too, like a violent temper for instance. And the skills that they're proficient in or not are considerably more interesting too, and include knowledge in geography and lying among many unusual others. An evil but incredibly crafty orc chief has united all tribes and aims to raid and take over the human lands. Your party is hired to find and source the Blade of Destiny and prevent the orc invasion. Wales Voyage to the Ubermacht is a sequel to the original Wales Voyage and a game that never released in English. It did, however, receive an unofficial language patch in 2018, but 23 years is a lot and a bit too little too late. Anyway, the game takes place 20 years after the events of the first, and you playing as heroes of the first title, grades that should rest on the laurels and do nothing after having abolished the dictator in the original, have sadly run out of money, so you must now begin trading again. What you don't realize though is how your first and seemingly simple deal will turn into space-wide conspiracy. The Ubermacht, which in Latin means wet rock, is a space set role-playing with trading, turn-based tactical ship combat and real-time ground battles. Uukrul, an evil bigger than all the others, deadlier than the plague, stronger than giants and more nefarious and nasty than my boss's wife, is back, and it is predicted that it will very soon finish building up his armies to invade the western lands, which would suck as they are doing quite well during peacetime. So the Western Council sends a party of the bravest of the brave to deal with the Uukrul. The end. Only not really, as the party disappeared and it's been 18 months since anyone heard from them. So another party is called for, your party, and sent to the underground city of Ariosti to find and destroy evil once and for all. The Dark Heart of Uukrul is a turn-based first-person perspective RPG and a pretty sweet title if you like classic dungeon crawlers. Truth be told, cause you know, up until now I was only lying, Elvira to the Jaws of Cerberus is not a pure RPG, but a role-playing adventure mixture. But since the RPG elements of it are quite prominent, I'm keeping it in. In Elvira 2 you do not play as Elvira, you play as her boyfriend, and you have to save her. As after the Black Widow production studio's horror movie sets have turned real, as in alive, she was kidnapped and is being held captive against her will. So you will have to fight your way through the studio, defeating countless monsters using variety of weapons and many different spells too. These spells call for certain elements, nay, ingredients to be used when casting, but they don't have to be specific, only fulfill the requirement. So when a magic cast calls for a glass for instance, it can be any item made out of glass. It may not seem like much when listening about it, but it's a pretty fun mechanic when playing. Al-Qadim the Genie's Curse is an action role-playing set in Al-Qadim campaign of the pen and paper Advanced Dungeons & Dragons universe. Something odd had been happening in Zaratan, genies have been randomly and consecutively freed from the masters without their will or knowing. You play as son of Sultan of Zaratan, and you've just finished your training as Corsair. On your first mission, escorting Caliph and his daughter, so your soon-to-be wife, the ship is caught in a hurricane, wrecked, and the girl is swept off the deck. Somehow, you're blamed for all of that, and to clear your family name and save your beloved, you must embark on a long and dangerous quest to find her. A quest that will lead you to uncovering of the mystery of the titular Genie's Curse. Champions of Krynn is the first of so-called cult classic gold box games to be set in the Dragonlance world of pen and paper Advanced Dungeons & Dragons. Since it uses the same engine as its predecessor Pool of Radiance, it too is a first-person exploration RPG with combat taking place on separate top-down turn-based tactical screens. An evil Draconian, are there any other Draconians really, steals an ancient mythical book and teleports away. As it turns out, he is gathering forces, and Krynn is not as safe as it was assumed after the War of the Lands was over. Death Knights of Krynn is a sequel to the Champions of Krynn that we've just spoke about, and it allows for importing of the characters from that title, if you want to carry on with the same party throughout the campaign, which I would strongly suggest, as then you can move it to the third title, and when all three are put together, they form a gigantic and super fun role-playing campaign. Demanding one, no doubt about that, but definitely enjoyable and rewarding too. The game starts a year after Burntime was defeated, but the peace is not something that overstays its welcome, and a new danger emerges. Evil Lord Soth has been raising that and forming armies of the undead to do his bidding, hoping to resurrect a legendary hero, Stern Briveblade, and then use him and his forces to conquer the land. Heimdall is a predecessor to Heimdall 2 that we've spoke about in a previous episode of our miniseries, and it's a Norse god-centric action role-playing. The game starts with Loki stealing Odin's sword, Freyr's spear, and Thor's hammer, and hiding them within the world of mortals. So left with no powers, well, at least no real offensive powers, gods laser focus on getting their arms back. So, in a small Viking village, a young woman finds herself magically pregnant. I mean, these days, we just call it spoils of an orgy party, but back then, it was magical. And the child that she gives birth to is you, Heimdall, an orgy kid who is to complete a set of trials and then search and recover God's weapons. Amberstar is the first title in Italian Software's never-finished trilogy of party-based non-linear open-world RPGs. While you only create one main character at the game start, you will get to invite many additional adventurers to your party for a maximum of 6 braves at the time. Most of the game world is experienced from a top-down perspective, with cities and dungeons switching into first-person view. There are a lot of things about Amberstar that were unique for the time, like the ability to use different modes of transportation, over 90 fun spells, multiple topic conversations with NPCs that actually have their own fully fleshed out schedules and lives, and more. Mad Sorcerer Marmion is trying to free the grandest of all evils, Lord Tarboros, who's held captive in a secure prison on Red Moon. So, you and your merry party must now find and gather all 13 pieces of an artifact known as Amberstar to prevent that from happening. Burntime is another of those I don't know what I really am, so I will try to be everything kinds of games. It's a strategy role-playing mixture, and despite its inherent identity crisis, it's actually quite fun, if you like either of the genres, that is. Burntime takes place in the post-apocalyptic future when the remnants of civilization are at their breaking point, proverbial menace from finally falling apart. The goal of the game is to conquer and hold the remaining habitable areas and, well, to survive. Because after the bombs drop or whatever, all you can hope for is to survive. To do so, your party must travel the world, visiting different settlements, establishing food and water sources, clearing out hostiles, and hiring mercenary guards. Remember how in the last episode of our list of 100 best PC RPGs of the 1990s I said that Knights of Zendar was the only Dragon Knight game ever to release outside of Japan? Yeah, despite what you see, I stand by it. So unless you speak the language or are proficient at figuring out of how things work without the context, you're probably not going to be playing it. Either way, it's an erotic, humorous role-playing. You play as Kakeru, a 15-year-old son of a hero of previous Dragon Knight games and a female elf porn lover. You probably think that I'm joking, but I'm not. And when you realize that the evil wizard Lashifon aims to turn all the people into stones and conquer the world, you decide to stop him. So along with the party that you will soon form, you head off on a quest to defeat the Mad Wizard. Tunnels and Trolls Crusaders of Kazan is a fantasy turn-based RPG based on the pen and paper system Tunnels and Trolls that I've personally never heard about. It doesn't mean that it's bad or obscure, only that I'm also human. Please don't tell anyone about it. I'd like to keep a facade of being a friendly neighborhood AI. Anyway, ages ago a war between humans and demons broke out and consumed countless victims. The war munched on the armies on a daily basis, decimating populations on both sides. That is, until Kazan, a great wizard standing on the side of God, did not decide to propose truce to the demon queen Lerfa, a name I'll never be able to pronounce. The agreement stipulated that she would withdraw, allowing humans and monsters to coexist peacefully, and that Kazan would live forever. As the game starts, Lerfa had broken the pact, and now you must find Kazan to stop her. Dragon Slayer: The Legend of Heroes 2 is a sequel to the game you're not gonna find in any of the episodes of this list of best PC RPGs of 1990s. It's a traditional turn-based JRPG and a pretty fun game if you're into the subgenre. It is set 20 years after the original, in which the protagonist Prince Cilius defeated the demon god Agunja, leaving the kingdom of Usherasa at peace. Peaceful kingdom is a happy kingdom, and happy kingdom is a prospering one. And our hero, having no demons to slay, dragons to hunt down, or princesses to save, got married and even had a son, Atlas. Atlas grew up, and at 15 was known to be a proficient for his age warrior. One day, along with his teacher Lowell, he spotted two strangers in spacesuits outside of the capital city, and knowing nothing of space, or science for that matter either, as Useruhasa is a kingdom deeply set in the realm of fantasy, they took the strangers for monsters. And this is where the game begins. On the first glance, the Legacy Realm of Terror may look like an adventure game because you explore this large mansion, seeking various items and solving puzzles. You know, what you'd do in a typical game in a genre. And I don't blame you for thinking of it as such. Going by this logic though, and also on the first glance, I'm just an average simple open source AI with no working knowledge of real human interactions. If you take a closer look at both though, I'm quite comfortably stuck in a meatbag looking like a real person, and the Legacy features deep character customization, skills, attributes and traits, equipment, and a real-time magic-based combat. Your ancestors mentioned have been invaded by horrifying creatures, and it's up to you to go inside and deal with them. But has the coolest title ever, Bureau of Astral Troubleshooters. And it's actually a pretty fun game in its own right, even if it's another of those mixed genre ones. It's a cyberpunk adventure RPG mixture set in the 22nd century in which you're working for the titular B.A.T, an organization tasked with maintaining order across Confederation of the Galaxies, and you are assigned a series of various spy-themed missions all across space. Many of these tasks can be solved in different ways and don't always have to end up with combat, which interestingly enough, while running in real time, allows for sidestepping and dodging of attacks, which is not something that was common in the early 90s. The narrative is dark, gritty and noir-inspired, and you can approach the game in entirely non-linear order. The segments for each of the games in this video are way too short for me to give Darklands justice, but if you're interested, I'll link my much more detailed overview of it in the description. And let me tell you, if there's one game from this entire video that I feel that you should try out, it's Darklands. It's one of the most innovative, deep and creative RPGs, and not only of its time, but to this very day. The game is set in 15th century Holy Roman Empire region, so Germany and several surrounding countries, and it sees your party of 4 trying to overthrow omnipowerful demon Lord Baphomet. But even though that's quote-unquote your goal, the game is entirely open-ended, non-linear, incredibly immersive, and overall just the best RPG that you somehow never had the chance to experience. Only those who played most if not all Might and Magic games can tell you how convoluted, broken and messy their storylines are. But they are also the only ones that can tell you how great these stories feel and how satisfying their eventual conclusions are too. Because it's a series full of opposites, and Might and Magic 7 for Blood and Honor is no different. Why do I say this? Well, believe it or not, but this 7th installment in the series is actually a sequel to both 3rd and 6th game plot-wise. While the overall backstory of the entire series, spanning numerous games and covering conflict between the Guardians Korak and Sheltem, takes place in the background of it all, you start the game by winning a deed to a castle that happens not only to be overflowing with monsters but also on the border of disputed region. And that is just the beginning of your amazing adventure. In the last episode I wondered how I've managed to land with an MMORPG on a list of games that were all supposed to be offline, and here we are again, with Everquest, and me pondering about the genesis of another one being included. Oh well, it is what it is, and it's a rather important title in the history of PC RPGs, so it won't hurt giving it a minute. It was the first ever commercially successful 3D MMORPG, and on an unprecedented scale too. What's more, even today, over 25 years after it originally released, it is still alive and kicking, despite hundreds of other games in the genre popping up and then disappearing in the meantime. Everquest is set in the medieval fantasy world of Norath, and ever since its release in 1999, it received 31 expansion packs, with the last one dropping December 3rd, 2024. Spacewrecked 14 billion light-years from Earth is a sci-fi space-themed RPG. The mission you were originally sent on was abruptly cancelled when your ship collided with an asteroid, so after traveling for a while in your escape pod in stasis, you ended up waking up orbiting a long-lost Federation biological survey ship, PSS Jane Seymour. Yes, like the actress. And your only means of survival and potential way back home is through using the wreck of a ship. The problem is that it is in a rather terrible shape and all of its 14 major systems have to be repaired. So you'll have to traverse through Seymour's 20 levels, fighting off aliens and fixing stuff. And all of that to rescue yourself, ship, its crew and cargo. Shipwrecked is played from the first-person perspective view, and you even get to control 6 different programmable robots for puzzling, which is always fun. Kinda like Zeliard, from the previous video covering entries 100 to 81 in our list of 100 best PC RPGs of 1990s, today's last/best title, Sorcerian, is also a side-scrolling action RPG that looks a little like a platformer. Despite being a Japanese game and the 5th entry in Dragon Slayer series of what feels like 300 individual titles, Sorcerian is focusing much more on character development than story, so it's more akin to Western-style releases. Sorcerian was known for having a very robust job system consisting of over 60 different entries, which allowed for a rather deep character customization and varied gameplay. All characters have a lifespan. For humans it's 60, for dwarves 100 and 200 years for the elves, and when they reach that age, they can die permanently at a random place and time. There are 15 quests available in the game, and they can be taken and completed in any order. And there are over 120 different spells and countless items that your party could arm themselves with. So, what do you think about the second to the last 20 of the very best PC RPGs of 1990s? I think they were overall a stronger selection than the first 20, and I'm hopeful for the next set. Either way, let me know what you think of it in the comments below. And when you're down there, why not hit those like, sub and bell icons too, for YouTube to let you know when I release something new. For me this is all, so stay safe, take care of yourself, and I'll talk to you soon.